Welcome, everyone. We are here with our youth leadership and civic engagement panel, and I'd love for our distinguished guests to share a little bit about themselves and their role in community. So let's go around and let's do some introductions. Let's start with Greg.
Hey everybody, my name is Greg Garcia. I work with Cities Rise. We're a global platform to transform mental health in cities around the world. And I also am involved in the Filipino community around here and Asian Pacific Islander community.
Thank you. Nia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nia Moore-Weathers. I'm the community organizer for a local nonprofit here in Sacramento called Youth Forward. We are a youth advocacy organization that works at the local and state level to really just protect our most marginalized youth, which are Black and Brown youth. We know this. We're looking for permanent funding streams in our budget, and we're looking for opportunities for youth to have leadership opportunities and civically engage with their communities. I'm also a co-founder of the Justice to Jobs Coalition. We're seeking economic liberation for Black and Brown people who've been impacted by the criminal justice system here in California. And I am also a representative from the Sacramento Kids First Coalition, recently formed here off of the campaign of Measure G, which was a permanent budget set aside in the Sacramento budget for a permanent children's fund.
Awesome. Thanks. And Kari?
Hey, peace family. My name is Kari J. I'm a super proud Sacramento native, artist, creative, and educator, working with the Mutual Assistance Network as a home visitor. I'm co-founder of the West to West movement. And, again, like I said, an artist and proud community member. So happy to be here with you all. Oh, my pronouns are she and her as well.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and jump into our first question. What's one issue that impacts our youth today that you wish people knew more about? And anybody can start. We don't have to go in a particular order.
I could start us off. I forgot to take myself off mute. We're all living in the virtual reality these days, right? I think one of the things that impacts youth that I wish more people knew about is the criminal justice system, right? So I think traditionally when we're thinking about the criminal justice system, we think about it impacting adults, right? I think that we all know that here in America, we have a vast criminal justice system that basically enslaves Black and Brown people at overwhelming rates compared to others, right? But what we don't traditionally think about, I think when we think about our criminal justice system, is the fact that for a lot of those people who are inside of those jail cells as adults, there are children back at home, right, who are missing resources. Not only missing resources from those parents who aren't able to maybe work and provide for their families, but also missing resources from their communities, from that same criminal justice system. If we look at the California budget, we see that a vast majority of it is sent to law enforcement. We know that those law enforcement agencies are sent to Black and Brown neighborhoods overwhelmingly. And we know that because they're sent there, they over-criminalize our Black and Brown adults, and not just our adults, but our youth as well, who are sent to mass juvenile detention halls where they do not receive proper resources that are centered around healing, right? So I think that this is one thing that I wish more people would think about when we're thinking about providing resources for youth. A lot of resources for youth are being sent to our law enforcement agencies.
Absolutely. I would echo that sentiment of the criminal justice system and how youth are impacted the criminal justice system as an issue that we need to put more attention to. When asked this question, my heart was inclined to speak to youth in the sex trafficking rings and how sex trafficking and human trafficking has affected Sacramento as a city. I feel that we are not equating and aligning our understanding of sex trafficking and human trafficking with this idea of child abuse. And when we talk about trafficking, it's kind of in its own corner. We talk about it from a very far removed sentiment, but we are not regarding victims of child abuse as children, or victims of trafficking as children, as future students or former students. And I really would like to see our communities align and answer to the call of this crisis, the pandemic within the pandemic, that our babies are not at home with their families. Because they are being trafficked out of our city into the major cities and major trafficking rings across the nation. It's happening right here in Sacramento. And I feel that if our sensibilities and sensitivities toward children, understandings of what children were going through in this moment, in this time, were a bit more heightened, we would have a better pulse and be able to say more, speak more to how our babies are suffering with this pandemic of sex trafficking in Sacramento.
Greg, you want to add on to that?
Yeah. I think for me, I agree with everything that's been said so far. And I would want to add that the way I look at things, the intersectionality of everything that's been mentioned in white supremacy culture, I feel like young people are growing up. I mean, we all kind of grew up within that, but for some reason, I guess it's social media or whatever, but it's more pronounced now with the competition in schools, how it affects people's mental health. They get involved, they make the wrong decisions, they end up in the criminal justice system, and it's so pervasive. The white values, it's everywhere, and it's not like it's not known, but it's just so deep and pervasive that it affects young people in every aspect.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that response. That kind of leads us right into this next question. So, what can we do about it? How can our youth and our political leaders inspire others to create a more fair and just society where we're not dealing with some of the stuff that we've mentioned?
Well, I think it depends on the person, right? I'd like to think that we're all like different and unique individuals, so we would all take our inspiration from different places. For me, that looks like honesty and intentionality and being strategic when we implement policy for our youth, and knowing that there's accountability in myself and in others, right? Like when I think about the most inspirational people, who I consider inspirational, a lot of them are musical artists, right? And they're musical artists who pursue truth in its purest form. Somebody who I really, really love, whose music I enjoy, is Erykah Badu, right? And I think that if any of you listen to Erykah Badu, or some of her songs, then you know what I'm talking about. She's speaking from the heart always, and she is speaking a truth that I can see and I can feel. That's how I would like to see our youth inspire others. That's how I would like to see our political leaders inspire others. Because when we are speaking our truth and we're being intentional about that, then we can always trust and know that at the end of the day, we've done our best, right?
Absolutely. I would echo sentiments that creative freedom and creative freedom of expression have been ways that youth have led revolutionary movements. I will also say that young people, it's time for us to be extremely aware and knowledgeable of our circumstances on paper, on paperwork and off paperwork. What that means for me is it's like being very well read in anything that we need to be read. And that's not to say that our people are not, but I think the access to information and the access to resources is one of our struggles and our issues. So a lot of times we don't have access to information, then we are oppressed because we don't have access to that information. And in the age of information, in this heightened age of access, be it the virtual world that we're living in today, I would just challenge all of my people to know everything, to think everything, to ask every question, to seek every single answer, and to be so aware that it's duty and responsibility to make the best of our situations based on the information that we have. The more that you know, the more that you owe. And I feel that our community, we've seen some of our best and our brightest students go off into the universities, Ivy League, grad school, PhD program. They go and they educated, and then we come back and, you know, we come back to the same conditions in our community, and our questions are like, wow, what are we to do with all of these resources that we have acquired in, you know, the ivory tower? We've gone and we've done it, and then what are we to do with, you know, all this education? So I would just like to inspire young people to keep asking questions, to keep demanding more, to stay critical, to stay vigilant, to stay uncomfortable with your circumstances enough that you ask the right questions enough. And then speak up. My second thing I'd say young people in political leadership do is to stay vocal, to not be so comfortable and be uncomfortable enough where you have to speak up and do something about it. Sometimes your speaking up is in the form of music. Sometimes your speaking up is in the form of like public speech, public speaking, or some sort of platform you create for yourself on social media. But I think that we are way too brilliant, way too blessed to be alive and living with blood and going through our full body and breath in our lungs to sit here and be quiet, to be stagnant, or how do I say, still, you know what I'm saying? We got to really, really, really go as far as we can go, as high as we can jump, and then do more.
No, I follow that, man. That's not fair. No. I think for me, to piggyback into what Kari was saying, the critical analysis piece and identity, those are the things that I would encourage young people and political leaders to, you know, like everybody is saying, learn more. Because what we've learned in schools is not everything, right? And we've been taught to basically hate ourselves, right? And just specifically for young people that I'm speaking to right now is that, you know, like Kari was saying, we have a lot of talent and a lot of potential, and including like values that are in our family at such a deep level, you know, and those aren't represented in the systems that we interact with every day, right? And so if we want to create a more just society, we have to analyze, you know, what's different about our values versus the values of the systems that we live in. And then we can start adding those pieces that are missing into these systems, right? Because, you know, we can express ourselves, we can learn about our identity. That helps us get to a place where we're able to diagnose the problems within the systems that we and our people are living in at the same time. But that first starts with our own awareness, our own critical thinking. We don't learn critical thinking at school, right? We learn, you know, information and we're taught to regurgitate it back, but we don't think to question things or to look at things and say, why doesn't that feel right for me, right? And even if it is uncomfortable, we have to keep pushing and asking for more, because, you know, it's up to us to keep, you know, making this happen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think oftentimes people will make decisions about our young people without them involved. And our next question kind of points to that. So I'm curious to know, just from your perspective, how can our young people lead more in political and civic engagement during this time of COVID-19? What are some things that they can do more of?
I can speak to that. I mean, I'm a community organizer with a youth advocacy organization, and I think when the pandemic hit, we all kind of said, "Oh no," right? Because we thought to ourselves, "How are we going to continue to engage and have those honest conversations with our youth?" I think if we're looking for one way that young people can help lead more in political and civical engagement during COVID-19, that's one way, right? I think that unites kind of what I was talking about earlier about being honest and intentional, and then kind of what Kari and Greg touched on, which is about taking that next step and having some critical thinking. It's about having those open and honest discussions. At the start of the pandemic, Youth Forward was pursuing some youth mental health work with the Sacramento County Office of Education. But that conversation started to change because we knew that youth were going to be going into distance learning, and we had questions around resources. Were youth comfortable with that? Were they still being able to be in contact with their administration, with their teachers? Did they have time to talk to classmates? These were all questions we were wondering. So We had those honest conversations with youth. We did interviews, and based on all of that work that we did, we were able to bring together a set of recommendations that we sent to school leaders here in Sacramento. And we were able to bring our youth that we had those honest and intentional conversations with in front of a group of adult leaders within their city who work and preside over their schools, and have a conversation about, frankly, what they weren't doing during distance learning during this pandemic. And more importantly, some ideas that they had for how they could make it better. Right. So I think that, again, one of those ways that youth can civically engage is look for those opportunities where you can have those honest discussions with those leaders who have the most impact in your environments. That's what I would always say.
I would inspire young people and encourage young people to become a lot more active with just like the global community during COVID. I think we are watching the world experience a pandemic, and it feels like it's 17 different pandemics going on everywhere around the world, because everywhere around the world, young people are dealing and healing through this pandemic in their own right. And since I've been quarantining from home, I've been able to connect with way more young people online, way more artists, way more creatives, way more community organizers doing work. In the beginning of the year in 2020, when we were protesting for the death of George Floyd, I was connected to organizers across the nation because everybody was online looking for information. Everybody was online trying to connect to community organizers. Everybody was online just staying connected. So I would think that, like we do every time we are faced with adversity, and every time we get the short end of a stick, relief or refuge, we expand within ourselves, within our community, within our network, within our people, within our village, to make sure we get what we need. And I would just encourage young people to do that, like aggressively, to make sure there's no one person that you want to see in this world that you can't connect to. I've been inspired during this time to reach out to some of like my most, I would say, ambitious collaboration future collaborations. I've been reaching out to people that are just out of my reach. Like, man, you at home on your computer too. Like, what's up? And kind of being honest about what we are going to do as a people together. I think this is our time to sit back, to reassess our assets, to reassess our needs, and get active about making it make sense for our people. I think we are challenged right now and a disadvantage because we can't be together physically, but that doesn't mean that we can't be planning for this revolution to take place. That doesn't mean that we can't be sitting here and synchronizing our watches and making sure that everybody got what they need for when its doors crack back open and we are back in the streets. What are we going to be doing to make sure that things don't go back to normal for us? Because we honestly weren't living under the right and just society before COVID-19. So now that the pandemic has heightened and further divided these gaps that we know to be true, how are we going to make sure when things go back to normal that we're not just giving our children the same subpar service in these public institutions, that we're not giving them anything less than they deserve when they come back into our care in the community? So I hope that young people are doing their best to stay prepared, to stay aware, like I said before, to stay informed, to let nobody sell you no wolf tickets or no lies, that you know everything to be true because you feel it firstly in your spirit, and then you move secondly and accordingly to that. But we need to be charged up. And specifically, I'll say this lastly, and it's like, to become more in tune with your spirit has been a blessing for me in this whole pandemic. We go at the pace of all of our devices and all of our obligations and all of our meetings and all of our, deadlines, but we really forget that you are a being, a spiritual being having a human experience, that your spirit is like your first mind, your first voice, that little voice inside of you that says, hey, I need more, or, hey, I need this much. Listen to that and stay in tune with that. And young people, remember that there are people fighting for you. There are people who believe in you when it seems dark by yourself, when you feel like you're in a room by yourself. Just know that we got you, and there are people working on your behalf.
For me, I want to take the practical approach. In my work, we get to bring young people together with local leaders here around Sacramento and the county and the city. And on occasion, I would watch my colleagues, prepare young people to, with the agendas and everything. And one thing that we're really encouraging young people to do is to change the culture of these meetings with the leaders, right? Meetings can be very stuffy and very specific, and I encourage young people to change it up. It doesn't need to be that way. If you need to have a music festival or performances before a meeting, then so do it. Make it where you and your peers feel comfortable in doing something and being able to speak your truth, like everybody's been talking about. Um, we live in this way of doing things, and we don't necessarily need to do that. And I think COVID is the perfect opportunity to stop and think and analyze. What have we been doing? Why are we doing meetings like this only? Like one of the things for me was like, for every day I have to like talk in meetings where I'm only sometimes the like only person of color, and um, it took me a while to figure out how to be me, right? And so once I did that, though, what I was able to tell people, it rang more true because I was giving perspectives that, they haven't heard before. So, people need to hear that, and young people, I think, those perspectives need to be heard the most. And if you make it the way you want it to be, if you are able to add expression, music, dance, art, so be it. If that needs what you need to do, if you need to have a sideshow and then you have some kind of event after, then do it because you know let's make it so that we can feel comfortable at the same time. It doesn't need to be stuffy with agendas and Rogers rules all the time. It could be different.
I agree. It can be different, and I know that it will be different because our experience during this time has changed things forever. But I'm curious to know, and this could be your answer to this next question could be maybe it's stuff that you're already doing, or maybe it's something new. But what's one commitment that you will make to build upon Dr. King's dream and his legacy?
Just to be determined and to not give up. When I think about Dr. Martin Luther King, I think about the sacrifice. I think about the dedication. I think about the fortitude and the strength that it took to walk the path that he took. So the commitment that I always want to try and make is just to not give up, just to stay determined. When you think that that's the last drop that you can give, see if you can give one more drop. And when I say this, I don't mean to encourage people to pour from an empty cup. I don't encourage this. What I mean is not to give up on your spirit, like Kari was saying earlier. The spirit is an indomitable force. It's not something that anybody can take from you. And so what I mean when I say don't give up is to not give up on yourself, essentially. Keep pushing forward, continue to expand, continue to grow, continue to challenge yourself, and continue to push. That's my commitment.
My commitment to build upon Dr. King's dream and ultimately his legacy is to pick up exactly where he started and to dismantle capitalism with this idea that we are all one people and we are all leaders of the Poor People's Campaign. People question, and any scholar like Black history or really just Dr. King will be able to tell you that he was assassinated in the height of his tone taking a turn. His message began to focus more on money and production of wealth in our communities. So I feel like when we talk about how are we going to build upon Dr. King's dream, it's equally that we build upon like what he was doing when he was taken away from us. And a big part of that is dismantling this idea of capitalism, Black capitalism, and making sure that we are taking care of each other as people and that we are our first and best resource. I will make a commitment to utilizing our people, our community resources, and making sure that I make myself a community resource so that we realize that we are our best, first and best resource.
For me, our communities have been divided and conquered so many times. And even with the nonprofit industrial complex, we're siloed into these funding streams and pots where we can only do specific work. And, you know, like Kari was saying, the work of Dr. King led to that point where he was talking about classism, and the wealth and distribution in this country, um, and how that really is the main divider. And my commitment is to help connect people, keep people connected, heal the divisions and separations that we've been uh, we sometimes can see, and then other ones that we can't see, like when it comes to funding, when it comes to how we do business, how we do meetings, and undoing all of that stuff. Because there's so many things that, like, once you start unwrapping these layers, you realize other things come out. So, my commitment is to just keep people connected and helping people understand, like, this also plays in with our mental health, to be able to redefine and recapture what we've been missing in our lives and in our culture and our values, and to be able to see the similarities, not just the differences that we're always seeing every day.
Thank you all for your time, your energy, and your wisdom during this conversation. This was amazing. You dropped so many gems for people. I can't wait to rewind and listen again. So thank you all so much for your time. We're going to sign off.